The captured Kesperin cruiser, now renamed the First Lesson, hung in orbit beside the scarred shipyard. It was a silent, powerful symbol. But it was not the most important change. The change was in the air. The heavy fear was gone. It was replaced by a buzzing, focused energy. Humans moved through the corridors, not with bowed heads, but with purpose. They had work to do. Jin, Wu, and Sujin stood in the main hangar of the shipyard, now a bustling workshop. Before them lay the twisted, exposed guts of a Kesperin gravity drive, salvaged from a damaged destroyer. Jin Wu's tools were scattered on a table. Sujin studied a readout of the drives, biological support systems, the parts meant to keep Kesperin crews healthy. Their gravity manipulation is precise, Jin Wu said, not looking up from a crystalline control node. But it is linear, like drawing a straight line. What if the line could bend? He sketched a quick diagram on a screen, a gravity field that pulsed in a wave, not a steady push. Sujin nodded, pointing to her own data. Their biology cannot handle rapid change. Their ships are built to be stable, like a flat plane. A wave would make their crews sick. But ours, she shrugged. We get seasick, then we get used to it. We adapt. They were not copying. They were learning, then diverging, taking the Kesperin alphabet and writing a new, more chaotic poetry with it. In another bay, teams were stripping Kesperin energy weapons, not to remake them, but to understand their power source. The goal was not a better gun, but a new kind of engine. Across the station, Dayan worked in a converted cargo bay. It was a training ground. Before him stood 50 men and women. They were not soldiers. They were volunteers. He held up a Kesperin sidearm, then tossed it to the floor with a clatter. This is what they expect, he said, his voice echoing. They expect you to pick it up and try to shoot. You will lose. Their armor is too good. He picked up a hydraulic cutter, the kind used to open jammed doors. This is a tool. It is not a weapon. Until you need to cut through a bulkhead to get behind their guards. He held up a small sonic projector. This is not a weapon. It is a doorbell. A very loud doorbell that only they can hear. He smiled, a rare, hard smile. We do not fight their war. We build our own battlefield. And on our battlefield, a wrench is more dangerous than a rifle. The trainees picked up tools. They practiced moving in silence. They practiced ambushes in tight corridors. They learned to see the station itself, the vents, the conduits, the maintenance shafts as their territory. In the largest mess hall, now a meeting chamber, Myray stood before a crowd. But it was not just humans. View screens showed faces from other parts of the station, and from the few other subjugated species who had been in the shipyard. The slender, plant-like verdants, the sturdy, rock-skinned Gron. They had all been servants. Now they were an audience. Myray spoke without grandeur. She spoke plainly. They told us we were weak because we could not lift what they could. So we learned to build levers. They are strong, but they are slow. They are vast, but they are predictable. On a screen beside her, simple diagrams appeared. The flawed conduit, the sonic frequency, the gravity tether trick. It was not a secret. It was a lesson plan. Our weapon is not a blade, she continued. It is a question they cannot answer. What if? What if we do not attack the shield, but turn off the power? What if we do not fight the soldier, but confuse his senses? What if we do not face the fleet, but untie its shoelaces? A verdant representative, its voice a soft rustle from the translator, asked, "You give us this knowledge?" "Why?" "Because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link," Myray replied. "And the Kesperins have made a galaxy of chains. We are not giving you weapons. We are giving you a lens. Look through it. See their grammar. Then write your own sentences. Your own people will know how. She was not building an empire. She was starting a school of asymmetric thought. The first textbook was their own victory. Deep in the heart of Kesperon space, in a vast, silent chamber, the High Command received the transmission. It was not on a military channel. It was on an open, public frequency. Any species with a basic receiver could hear it. There was no video, only data, and a voice. The voice was Jinwu's, calm and clear. The data was devastating. It was a catalog, a complete analysis of the Judgment's Claw Fleet's standard formation, with 17 points of systemic vulnerability highlighted. It detailed the harmonic weaknesses in 6 common classes of Kesperan cruiser. It included a biological brief on Kesperan neurological sensitivities to certain infrasonic ranges. It explained, in simple terms, the monolithic nature of their computer networks and the propagation rate of tailored data corruption viruses. It was not a declaration of war. It was an autopsy, a dissection of Kesperan power. Jinwu's voice spoke over the data. The Kesperan hegemony relies on predictability, scale, and technological uniformity. These are strengths. They are also fixed points. A fixed point can be leveraged. The attached analysis demonstrates the methodology of leverage. The first lesson is free. There was a pause. The data continued to scroll. Schematics, frequency graphs, statistical models of fleet deployment. The next lesson, the voice said, will be delivered upon your approach. The curriculum will be adapted to your specific tactical choices. We are waiting. We are learning. Then the transmission ended. The silence in the High Command chamber was absolute. The senior admirals looked at the data, frozen on their main screen. It was their own secret language, translated and published for the galaxy to see. Their strength had been turned into a checklist of weaknesses. The message was clear. We see you. We understand you. And we are no longer afraid of you. In a quiet room on the shipyard, the Kesperan overseer sat. It was not in a cell. It was in a study room. It had a desk, a viewer, access to non-critical data networks. It was a prisoner, but it was also a specimen under observation. The irony was not lost on it. The door opened. Jinwu entered, carrying a small tray with 2 cups of water. He placed one on the desk for the overseer. He took the other and sat in a simple chair. Why do you come here? The overseer asked. It had learned some human words. To observe, Jinwu said simply, and to answer questions. The overseer was silent for a long time. It looked at the human. It had dismissed him as a primitive, a tool. Now the tool had built a new world. You have no fleet. You have one station. You believe your tricks will stop the hegemony? No, Jinwu said. We believe your hegemony will stop itself. It will look at us, a problem it cannot solve with a hammer, and it will hesitate. While it hesitates, others will learn. The Gran on the mining asteroids, the Verdants in the agridomes. They will see the data we sent. They will start asking their own what-if questions. Your empire is built on certainty. We are the doubt. Outside the room's large window, the overseer could see a makeshift playground in a secured hangar. Human children were playing. They were building a tall, wobbly tower from mismatched blocks and scrap metal. The tower leaned. It looked ready to fall. The children laughed. They did not try to steady it. They watched it sway. When it finally collapsed, they did not cry. They immediately began to sort through the pieces, arguing excitedly about how to build the next one, which would be even taller and stranger. The overseer watched them. It finally understood. The galaxy had expected a fight, a war of attrition, which humanity would lose. But humanity had never been fighting a war. They had been treating it as a course, a problem to be studied, broken down, and solved. The children were not just playing. They were practicing. Failure was not an end. It was data for the next experiment. The hegemony had spent millennia building a perfect, unshakable tower. Humanity had just shown them how to pull out one block and watch the whole thing sway. And they were already looking for the next block dot. The overseer looked away from the children and back to Jinwoo. The human sipped his water, waiting for the next question. The lesson, it seemed, was still in session. The silence from the hegemony was not peaceful. It was the quiet before the storm. A fleet was coming. Every human in the shipyard knew it. The Kesperans could not allow this sickness, this quiet unraveling to spread. The only cure they understood was fire. The overseer received the orders. A battle fleet, the Judgment's Claw, was dispatched. Its mission was simple: sterilize the orbital shipyard. Eliminate the human infestation. Let the wreckage be a lesson to other species. The fleet was not coming to fight a battle. It was coming to perform an execution. On the command deck of the shipyard, the Kesperan officers moved with grim purpose. Evacuation shuttles were prepared for their own kind. Human life signs on the station were just numbers on a screen. Soon to be zero docked down below, the network felt the change in the air. The Kesperan guards were more tense. The patrols less frequent as they pulled back to secure key areas for their own escape. A terrible weight settled on everyone. This was the end they had always feared. Myray called the core group together in the deepest storage room they could find. The air was cold. Their breath made clouds. "They are going to destroy us all," Daeon said, his voice flat. "All of it. For nothing." "Not for nothing," Jinwoo said. He was looking at his data slate, but not really seeing it. He was seeing patterns. Gravity tethers. Formation flying. Kesperan doctrine. They are doing it because it is their only move. The only word they know in this situation is destroy. "So what is our move?" Sujin asked quietly. Jinwoo looked up. His eyes were focused far away. "We do not have ships. We cannot fight their guns. So we do not fight their guns. We fight their formation," he explained. The Kesperan fleet would approach in a perfect textbook formation. The hammer and anvil. A heavy battleship in the center. Cruisers flanking. Destroyers screening. Their strength was in their unity, their synchronized gravity wells. It was beautiful. It was also a ballet. And every ballet needs a stage. The shipyard's gravity tethers, Jinwoo said. They are for docking, for holding ships. Their fields are weak, but they are everywhere. Like roots. His plan was not to turn them into weapons. It was to turn them into an instrument. He had spent months with full access to the station's systems. He had written a program. A virus this time. It would not attack. It would redefine. It would tell the 100 gravity tethers around the shipyard that they were no longer separate tools. They were one giant, chaotic hand. When the fleet moves into position, they will sync their own gravity drives for stability, Jinwoo said. They will create a predictable field. My program will make our tethers reach out and tug, not hard. Just wrong. At the wrong times. It will be like 100 children pulling on the sheets of a made bed. Daeyeon shook his head. You will mess up their formation? So what? They will just get messy and then blow us up. No, Jinwoo said. In space, formation is everything. It is how they cover each other, how they focus fire. If one ship's vector is thrown off, it drifts into the firing line of another. Their own safety protocols will cause chaos. They will be blind for a moment. A long moment. It was a plan of stunning audacity. To use the enemy's own predictable perfection against them. To fight a fleet, not with a fleet, but with a math problem that the Judgment's Claw fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The ships were dark against the stars. They were massive, sleek, and terrible. They moved into position with calm, horrifying precision. The hammer and anvil, the battleship final word, took the center. It began powering its primary weapon, a gravity beam that could shatter a small moon. On the shipyard, alarms blared. Final evacuation warnings sounded for Kesperin personnel. Jinwoo sat alone at a secondary engineering terminal. His special access code bypassed the locks. His fingers flew over the keys. He uploaded his program. He saw it spread through the tether network like a whisper. He took a deep breath. He looked at the screen showing the perfect Kesperin formation. He typed the execute command. Across the skin of the massive shipyard, 100 gravity tethers woke up. They were not pulling ships in. They were pushing, pulling, tweaking the fabric of local spacetime in a rapid random sequence. It was not a powerful effect, but it was precisely tuned to the frequency of the fleet's synchronized drives. On the bridge of the final word, the Admiral felt it first. A shudder. A slight, sickening lurch. The stability field wavered for a microsecond. Minor gravitational anomaly from the station, a technician reported. Interference with our formation stability. Compensate, the Admiral ordered, but compensation required calculation. And the interference was not constant. It was chaotic. The tether fields pulsed and shifted. One cruiser, the Righteous Fire, overcorrected. Its port thrusters fired too hard. It slid sideways out of its lane. The ship directly behind it, the destroyer's swift reprisal, had to veer violently to avoid a collision. Its sudden move put it on a collision course with the gravity wake of the battleship. Automated systems on both ships shrieked warnings. The swift reprisal fired all thrusters to stop, killing its forward momentum. It became a dead, drifting weight in the middle of the formation. The perfect ballet became a stumbling, crashing mess. Ships scrambled to avoid each other. Communication channels filled with confused shouts. The firing solution for the final word's main weapon was lost. The Admiral stared at the viewer in disbelief. His mighty fleet was being undone not by missiles, but by a series of tiny, invisible shoves. Daeun watched it all on a stolen feed in a preparation room. His team was with him. 20 men and women. They were not soldiers. They were laborers, mechanics, cooks. They wore hardened work suits, not armor. They carried cutting torches, hydraulic rams, and the small, boxy sonic projectors. The Kesperin fleet was tangled. This was the moment. The long moment. Go, Daeun said, his voice a low growl. They moved. Not to ships, but to the airlocks. Not to fight the fleet, but to board the stranded, confused ships closest to the station. Jinwoo had given them the maps. He knew every maintenance hatch, every emergency access point on a Kesperin cruiser. Daeun's team shot across the short distance using construction grapple lines. They landed on the hull of the Righteous Fire, the cruiser that had drifted out of place. They moved to a small, unmarked panel. Jing Woin had said it was for external sensor cleaning. It was not meant to be opened from the outside, but it had a manual release for emergencies. Daeun pried it open with a crowbar. Inside was a narrow, dark tunnel. They crawled in. The gravity was different inside. Felt wrong. They moved in silence. They emerged into a deserted maintenance corridor. The lights were flashing red. Alarm sounds echoed, but they were Kesperin alarms, confused and overlapping. The crew was on the main decks, trying to understand what was happening to their fleet. Daeun led them forward. They turned a corner. 2 Kesperin crew members, armed with sidearms, were running towards the bridge. They saw the humans. They stopped, raising their weapons. Dayan didn't give an order. One of his team, a woman named Hana, raised her sonic projector. She pressed the button. The silent sound hit the Kesperans. They screamed, a high, pained sound. They dropped their weapons, clawing at their helmets. They collapsed to the floor, writhing. Dayan stepped over them. He felt no pity. He felt only a cold, clear purpose. This was the new grammar. They reached a heavy door. The bridge door. Dayan placed a shaped charge on the hinges. A small, precise explosion blew the door inward. They stormed onto the bridge of the righteous fire. The crew was small, mostly pilots and technicians. They turned, their large eyes wide with shock and terror. They saw humans in work suits, holding tools that hummed with a terrible, silent power. "The ship is ours," Dayan said, his voice booming in the enclosed space. "Do not move." Across the chaotic space around the shipyard, other teams were doing the same, boarding through the back doors, using confusion as their shield, using sound as their sword. The overseer stood on the command deck of the shipyard. It watched the viewer. It saw its mighty fleet in disarray. It saw the status lights of the righteous fire change from green to amber, then to a flashing red, the color of hostile control dot. It understood. The trap was not military. It was cognitive. Humanity had not built a better ship. They had built a better idea. They had turned the Kesperan love of order into a weapon against them. The main doors to the command deck hissed open. Not blown. They just opened. The access codes had been overridden. Jin Woo walked in first. He was still in his maintenance coveralls. Mai Rei walked beside him, her head high. They were not armed. The Kesperan guards, on the deck, raised their energy rifles. The overseer held up a hand, stopping them. It was curious. This was the final anomaly. It had to see. "It is over," the overseer stated, its voice calm. "You have taken a cruiser. One cruiser. The fleet will recover. They will burn this station from space. You have only delayed the inevitable. You were weak. You are weak." Mai Rei took a step forward. "You keep using that word. Weak. You think it means we cannot lift what you lift. So we learned to build a lever." She gestured to the viewer, to the tangled fleet. "You are strong, but you are slow. You are vast, but you are predictable. We did not fight your strength. We studied it, and then we gave it a problem it could not solve." Jingwu looked at the overseer. There was no hate in his eyes, just the cool focus of an engineer who has solved a complex equation. U-P. The knowledge was a fire. It needed to be contained, not quenched. Mai Rei became its keeper. She met people in corners. She spoke in the laundry rooms. She used the old methods of her archive circles, but now the lesson was different. It was not about history. It was about the future. She found Hyan, a thin man who worked in water reclamation. He knew every pipe in the station. She found G.A., a young woman who sorted supply manifests. She knew what arrived, when, and where it was stored. To each, Mai Rei gave a small piece of the truth. Not the whole plan. Just an idea. "Watch the patterns," she would say. The cleaning drones. The shift changes. The waste disposal routes. Find where the pattern is weak. Find where a small thing can make a big difference. She called it the first lesson. Observation. It was safe. It was passive. But it made people look at their world with new eyes. A network grew. Silent. Invisible. It had no name. It needed none. Jingwu gave her the technical words. The grammar. He explained the rigidity of the Kesperan systems. How everything was connected. How a failure in one small, stupid place could spread. He drew simple diagrams. My Ray translated them into stories, into instructions. Dayan's role changed. He was no longer just angry muscle. He became a recruiter of a different kind. He sought out people like him, people with strength and rage. But now he gave them a focus. He taught them not to punch a wall, but to find the loose brick. He formed small cells. Each cell knew only itself and one contact. My Ray was the center. Jinwu and Sujin were the brain. Dayan was the strong, silent hands. The plan was not to attack. Not yet. The plan was to teach, to give the Kesperans a lesson in cause and effect. A lesson they had forgotten. Jinwu chose the target, a secondary logistics hub. It was a cavernous room where drones sorted spare parts for ship repairs. It was run by 3 Kesperan overseers and 100 mindless drones. The system was a masterpiece of efficiency. It was also incredibly stupid. The hub was run by a single central computer. It told the drones what to do. It told the conveyors where to go. Everything depended on that computer. And the computer got its instructions from the main shipyard network. Jinwu had access. His special code from the overseer let him see the maintenance schedule for that hub's computer. He wrote a program. It was not a virus. It was not a weapon. It was a simple set of wrong instructions. He injected it into the maintenance update packet. It was a tiny piece of corrupted code. It told the hub's computer that a certain common power regulator was now classified as a Priority 1 hazardous material. The update installed at the start of the sleep cycle. The system rebooted. When the morning shift began, the first drone picked up a power regulator from an incoming bin. Its scanner read the part number. The central computer flashed an alert. Hazardous material. Containment protocol Alpha. Protocol Alpha was for toxic spills or radiation leaks. It was drastic. The computer immediately shut down the conveyor belt carrying that part. It sealed the ventilation ducts in that sector. It ordered all drones in the area to drop what they were doing and move to safe positions. It sent a frantic alert to the Kesperan overseers, but the part was not hazardous. It was just a regulator. The shutdown of the conveyor caused a backlog. Drones trying to move to safe positions collided with drones still trying to work. Boxes fell. The confusion triggered more automated alerts. The computer, following its rigid logic, began shutting down more and more systems to contain the non-existent threat. Within an hour, the entire logistics hub was a silent, frozen mess. Drones stood motionless. Conveyors were still. Critical repair parts were trapped inside. The 3 Kesperan overseers stood at their console, arguing in low, frustrated tones. They typed commands. They ran diagnostics. They found nothing wrong with the hardware. The system was perfectly healthy. It was simply following its orders to the letter. Jinwu watched from a security feed in a remote maintenance closet. He saw the confusion. He saw the paralysis. He felt no joy. He felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. The lesson was clear. Give a perfect system a perfectly wrong idea, and it will destroy itself. The Kesperans had built a galaxy of perfect systems. The overseer stood in the silent logistics hub. Its gray skin was perfectly still. It observed the frozen drones, the blocked conveyors. The baffled technicians. This was not sabotage as it understood it. There were no explosives, no broken machinery, no insurgents with weapons. The hub had simply stopped. The diagnostic reports were clear. The systems were functional. The failure was logical. A cascade of automated protocols. Had accessed the command logs. It saw the initial alert. Hazardous material. It traced it back. A faulty classification in the parts database. A corrupt data packet in a routine maintenance update. The source of the corruption was untraceable. It was a ghost in the machine. The overseer thought of Jinwoo, the Terran who saw flaws. It had not received a report about this. Why? This was an anomaly. A significant one. Was the Terran observer not doing his duty? Or was this anomaly of a kind he could not see? A sliver of cold unease, thin as a needle, entered the overseer's mind. This was illogical, chaotic. It resembled nothing in Kesperan experience. Rebellion was violence. This was education. Something was teaching its systems how to fail. The overseer reassessed the human records in its mind. Their history was not of great wars, but of rapid, chaotic adaptation, of problem-solving. They called it ingenuity. The overseer had dismissed it as a primitive trait. Now it wondered if it was a weapon it did not understand. The Kesperan response was traditional, a show of force. They could not find the saboteur, so they punished the population. Enforcer squads descended on the lower habitation blocks. They dragged people from their units. Not everyone, just enough. A random selection. A message. Daeyeon watched from a rooftop, his fists clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. He saw Mrs. Lee from the kitchens, her face white with fear. He saw young Min, the boy who delivered messages. They were thrown into a transport vehicle. "We have to do something," he hissed to Myrae, who stood beside him in the shadows. "They are taking innocent people." "I know," Myrae said, her voice tight. "But if we attack that transport, we play their game. They expect a reaction. They want a target. They want to fight the rebellion they imagine. So we let them take our people?" Daeyeon's voice was a raw whisper. No, Jinwoo's voice came from behind them. He had climbed up quietly. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We respond, but not to their move. We respond to their weakness." He had been watching the patrols, too. He saw the pattern. The show of force here meant fewer guards somewhere else. The Kesperans were using the old grammar, the grammar of fear and punishment. It was a sentence humanity knew by heart. They would write a new one. "Sujin's turn," Jinwoo said. Sujin's hands did not shake as she prepared the canister. It was not a weapon. It was a cleaner. A fast-acting, aggressive biological agent designed to break down synthetic waste. It was used in the Agridome's recycling systems. It targeted specific polymer chains, the very polymers used in Kesperan data crystals. Her small cell moved through the service tunnels. They knew the routes. Hyan, the waterman, had shown them the way. They came up under the Central Administration spire. It was the brain of the shipyard. Every record was here. Every order. Every identity. They waited for the shift change. When the hall was empty for 90 seconds, they moved. Sujin attached the canister to an air intake vent for a senior clerk's office. She set the dispenser to a slow, steady release. The agent was a fine, invisible mist dot. It did not harm the air. It did not harm the Kesperan clerk, who sat at the desk an hour later. The clerk worked. It filed reports on data slates. It placed slates into the storage rack. The agent settled on the slates, on the data crystals in the walls. It began to work. At a molecular level, it attacked the polymers that held the crystals together. It was slow, but relentless. The first sign was a clerk trying to retrieve a record. The slate flickered. The data corrupted. Then another, and another. Alarms sounded, but they were soft, confused alarms. System integrity alerts. Not security breaches. The corruption spread like a silent rot. It ate through backups. It dissolved archives. Within a day, the administration spire was in panic. Centuries of local records inventory, personnel files, duty rosters, shipment logs were turning to digital sludge. The hegemony's meticulous memory was being erased. No one was hurt. Not a single being was touched. But the shipyard's ability to function was crumbling. They could not track supplies. They could not manage payroll. They could not even verify who was supposed to be where the overseer stood in the midst of the chaos. Technicians rushed around it, their voices high with panic. It looked at a data slate in its hand. The screen fizzed with static, then went dark. The slate itself was becoming soft, warping. This was the response. Not an attack on the enforcers. Not a rescue of the prisoners. An attack on memory itself. On order. It was a reply in a language the overseer was only beginning to decipher. It was a language that said, "You can take our bodies. We will take your past." Jing-Woo walked through the shipyard with new eyes. His official duty was the same. He checked conduits. He calibrated gravity stabilizers. He replaced worn parts. But his other duty, the one given by the overseer, changed everything. He was now a sanctioned observer. The Kesperan passcode on his data slate opened doors. It made other Kesperans ignore him. They saw the code and looked away. He was part of the machinery. A mobile sensor. He spent days in the main engineering bay. He watched the Kesperan technicians work. He saw how they solved problems. They always went to the manual. They always followed the same steps. If a component failed, they replaced it with an identical one. They never asked why it failed. The design was perfect. The component was faulty. That was the only answer. He studied their ships. The designs were beautiful. They were also all the same. A Kesperan cruiser built 50 years ago looked almost the same as the stalwart Vigil. The upgrades were small. A little more power. A little better shielding. It was like a tree growing slowly. It only knew how to be a tree. He saw their routines. Patrols changed shift at exact times. Guards stood in the same places. Ship movements followed a precise schedule. It was all about order. It was all about control. It was also very predictable. Jing-Woo began to make notes. Not on his official slate. On a small, old-fashioned paper notepad he kept hidden. He drew diagrams. He wrote down times. He noted model numbers and serial codes. He was not planning anything. He was just learning the grammar of the Kesperan world. They had rules. He was learning to read them. Marie's face was healing. The bruise was a yellow-green shadow on her cheek. She sat in her small living unit. It was bare. The enforcers had taken almost everything. But they had not taken her mind. There was a knock on her door. It was not a Kesperan knock. It was heavy, deliberate. She opened it. Gaeun filled the doorway. He looked down at her bruise. His jaw tightened. "I saw them take you," he said, his voice low and rough. "I know," Mireille replied. She stepped back, letting him in. He did not sit. He paced the small room like a caged animal. "We cannot just take this. They beat you in the street. They treat us like dirt. We have to hit back." "How, Daeun?" she asked, crossing her arms. "With your fists? Against their armor? You will die. They will kill 10 others for your rebellion. It is what they expect. So we do nothing?" He growled, turning on her. "We do everything," she said calmly. "But not with fists. We do it with thought. They think we are stupid. That is our weapon. They will not see us coming." Daeun stopped pacing. He stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means we learn. We learn them. We find a crack. And we push." She looked at his large, strong hands. "Your strength is not in breaking a skull. It is in breaking a system. But to break it, you must first understand how it is built." He was silent for a long time. The anger was still there, but it was cooling, hardening into something more focused. How do we start? We find others. Quiet ones. Smart ones. Not soldiers. Thinkers. Technicians. Anyone who sees things they are not supposed to see. She smiled slightly. I know a maintenance worker. He sees everything. Sujin worked in the agri-dome. It was a vast, humid space full of strange plants from Kesper. The air was thick and sweet. Her job was to monitor the soil and the water. She made sure the plants were healthy. The Kesperans needed their specific foods. They could not eat human food. It made them sick. She had been working there for years. She had seen many things. She saw how the Kesperan botanists worked. They were careful, very careful. They avoided certain plant combinations. At first, she thought it was about growth or taste. But it was not. She had run her own experiments. In a hidden corner, using stolen scraps. She found that when two specific Kesperan fungi were grown near a particular root vegetable, they produced a vibration. A sound too low for humans to hear. An infrasonic resonance. She only discovered it because her monitoring equipment picked up a strange, regular pulse in the soil. She saw a Kesperan botanist accidentally walk near her hidden experiment. The alien did not see the plants, but it suddenly stumbled. It clutched its head. Its skin flushed a darker gray. A colleague hurried it away, shooting a nervous glance at the fungal beds. Sujin erased the data from the main system. She kept it in her private memory stick. She understood. It was a weakness, a biological flaw. The Kesperan nervous system was sensitive to this specific frequency. It caused them pain, disorientation. It was a secret they kept hidden. Even here, she was a quiet woman. She spoke little, but she watched. And she knew this secret was important. She just did not know what to do with it. Myray found Jingwoo in a maintenance corridor. He was alone, scanning a power relay. Jinwoo, she said softly. He turned. He recognized her. Everyone knew of Myray in her archive circles. He gave a small nod. Myray, you are well? Well enough, she said, touching her fading bruise. I hear you have new duties. You observe for the overseer. Jinwoo's expression did not change, but his eyes became cautious. How do you hear this? People talk. A man who is ignored sees many things. What do you see, Jinwoo? He looked at her for a long moment. He saw intelligence. He saw resolve. He saw someone who was not afraid. He made a decision. He pulled out his paper notepad. He opened it to a page with careful diagrams of energy conduits. I see a language, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Their technology is a sentence. It only says one thing. It is strong. It is rigid. It breaks if you read it wrong. He pointed to a specific joint in his drawing. Here, this is a word they always mispronounce. Myray looked at the drawing. She did not understand the engineering, but she understood the idea. They are predictable. Very, Jinwoo said. We need to speak with someone else, Myray said. A biologist. She has found a grammatical error of a different kind. They met in a disused storage closet deep in the agri-dome support system. It was hot and smelled of damp earth. Sujin was there, her hands clasped tightly. Daeyeon stood in the corner, a silent, watchful shadow. Sujin showed them her data. Graphs of sound waves. Notes on Kesperan physiology. It is a frequency, she explained quietly. Like a deep, deep note. We cannot hear it. It hurts them. It scrambles their thinking. They avoid the plants that make it. Jinwoo studied the data. He looked from the sound graphs to his own notes on Kesperan ship designs. He saw a connection. It was not a physical one. It was a connection of idea. Their ships are built for gravity waves, he said slowly. Their bodies are weak against sound waves. They master the big force. They ignore the small vibration. He looked around at the others. They only look up. They never look down. Dae-yun frowned. What does that mean? How do we fight with a sound they can't even hear? We do not fight them, Jinwoo said, a spark in his eyes for the first time. We fight their certainty. We show them that their rules are wrong. He pointed to Sujin's data. This is a key. He pointed to his own notes. This is a lock. We need to build the key. My Ray smiled. It was a hard smile. We start small. We test the grammar. Jinwoo and Dae-yun built the device in a hidden maintenance crawlspace. It was made from spare parts. A power cell from a broken cleaning drone. A frequency modulator from a discarded comms unit. A speaker from an old entertainment system. Jinwoo programmed it based on Sujin's numbers. Dae-yun assembled it with his strong, careful hands. They found their test subject near a quiet loading dock. A single Kesperan guard stood at its post, as it always did at this hour. The plan was simple. They would hide. They would activate the device for 3 seconds. They would observe. Dae-yun held the small, boxy device. He looked at Jinwoo. Jinwoo nodded. Dae-yun pressed the button. There was no sound to human ears. But the Kesperan guard immediately stiffened. It dropped its weapon. Its hands flew to the sides of its helmet. It let out a choked, gurgling cry. It stumbled against the wall, sliding down to the floor, its whole body shaking. Jinwoo counted. 1, 2, 3. He tapped Dae-yun's arm. Dae-yun released the button. The guard remained on the floor, twitching. After a minute, it slowly, painfully, got to its feet. It looked around, confused and terrified. It grabbed its weapon and hurried away, walking UNSTEA, DILY. In the darkness of the crawlspace, the two men were silent. They were not happy. They were not excited. They were scientists who had just watched a successful, terrible experiment. It works. Dae-yun whispered, his voice full of awe and horror. Yes, Jinwoo said. He looked at the crude device. It was just a box of scraps. It had just defeated a Kesperan warrior in full armor without touching it. They had not used strength. They had used knowledge. They had learned their first new word, and it meant pain. Jinwoo moved through the dim, humming corridors of the Kesperan orbital shipyard. The air smelled of ozone and something metallic. His coveralls were stained with grease. In his hands, he held a diagnostic scanner. Its soft blue light flickered over the exposed guts of a Kesperan cruiser's energy conduit. The ship was called the Stalwart Vigil. It was new. It was powerful. To the Kesperans, it was perfect. Jinwoo saw the problem immediately. It was a small thing. A tiny misalignment in the pulsed energy flow regulators. The Kesperans used gravity to channel their power. It was elegant. It was also rigid. The conduit joint here had a weakness. Under a full combat surge, the harmonic vibration would fracture it. The result would be a cascade failure. He marked it on his data slate with a small, precise symbol dot. He found the Kesperan engineer on the main deck. The alien was tall, with gray, pebbled skin and 4 long fingers on each hand. It did not look at Jinwoo directly. Jinwoo held up his slate. He spoke in the basic Kesperan trade tone. A flaw. In conduit sector 7 alpha. The harmonic resonance will cause a fracture under peak load. The Kesperan engineer took the slate. Its large, dark eyes scanned the data. A ripple passed over its skin, a sign of mild irritation. It handed the slate back. The design is optimal. Your sensors are primitive. Your understanding is insufficient. Return to your maintenance duties. Jinwoo did not argue. He bowed his head slightly. He took the slate back. He turned and walked away. His face showed nothing. Inside, he filed the information away. The flaw, the dismissal, the certainty of the Kesperin. He had reported it. That was his job. The consequence was not his. He moved to the next panel, his scanner humming dot in a small, windowless room in the lower habitation blocks of the shipyard. Myray smoothed a worn piece of paper on a table. 20 faces, young and old, looked back at her in the low light. The air was close, smelling of recycled air and human sweat. Today, she said, her voice calm and clear, we talk about the Battle of Hastings. A young man frowned. Why? What does an old Earth battle matter here? Now? Myray smiled. Because it is a story about expectation. The Saxon army held the high ground. They were strong. They expected a certain kind of fight. William the Conqueror's army was tired, landing on a foreign shore. They did the unexpected. They pretended to retreat. The Saxons broke their wall to chase them. And they were cut down. She looked at each of them. The Kesperins have their high ground, their technology, their ships, their rules. They expect us to fight on their terms, to be strong like them. History teaches us that victory often goes to those who rewrite the rules. She was passing around a fragile, real book, history text, when the door exploded inward. It was not a loud blast, but a sharp, pressurized crack. 2 Kesperin enforcers filled the doorway. They were bulkier than the engineers, clad in dark armor. Their weapons were not drawn. They did not need them. Archive circle is illegal, the lead enforcer stated, its voice a synthetic rumble from a translator unit. All cultural materials are forfeit. Disperse. Chaos erupted for a moment. People shoved data slates into pockets. Myray did not move. She slowly placed her hands on the table. Her eyes met the enforcer's blank visor. We are only talking, she said. The enforcer stepped forward. One large hand swept the books and slates from the table. The other backhanded Myray across the face. The blow was casual, brutal. She fell against the wall, her vision swimming. She tasted blood. She was dragged out by her arm. Her students were pushed aside. As she was hauled down the grimy corridor, her head lolled. In a shadowed intersection, she saw a figure. It was Dayen. He stood like a rock, his massive arms crossed over his chest. His face was a mask of pure, hot fury. He was trembling with the effort of staying still. Their eyes met for a second. In his, she saw a promise of violence. In hers, she tried to project a warning. Not yet. The stalwart vigil moved into the testing zone. The Kesperin overseer watched from the command center of the shipyard. The overseer was a model of its kind. Calm, analytical, certain. On the main viewer, the cruiser powered up its primary drives. The order was given for a simulated combat surge. On the cruiser's bridge, the crew activated the sequence. Energy surged through the conduits. For 3 seconds, all was normal. Then, a high-pitched shriek echoed through the ship. It came from deep within. On the overseer's viewer, a series of critical alerts flashed red across the stalwart vigil's schematic. The flawed conduit in sector 7 Alpha vibrated at a catastrophic frequency. It fractured. Pulsed energy, raw and furious, spewed into the engineering bay. Secondary systems failed. The ship's artificial gravity flickered. Lights died. The great cruiser drifted, dark and silent, a dead whale in a sea of stars. Alarms blared throughout the shipyard. The overseer did not flinch. Its long fingers tapped a console, calling up the maintenance logs for the stalwart vigil. It scanned the entries. Its gaze stopped on one. A routine inspection. Sector 7 Alpha. A noted potential harmonic flaw. Marked for review. The report was filed by Jinwoo, Terran. Maintenance grade -3. The overseer leaned back. The irritation it had felt at the ship's failure was now replaced by a colder, sharper emotion. Curiosity. The Terran had identified the problem. The Terran had been ignored. The result was total failure. This was an anomaly. The Kesperan worldview had no place for a servitor species offering correct technical analysis. It was illogical. Therefore, it required study. Jinwoo was cleaning his tools when the summons came. A Kesperan drone appeared at the entrance to his maintenance locker. A light on its front glowed yellow. Jinwoo, Terran. Report to Overseer Tertiary. Immediately. The other human workers in the bay looked up. Their eyes were wide with fear. A summons was never good. Jinwoo put his tools down neatly. He followed the drone. The overseer's chamber was high up in the shipyard's central spire. It was quiet and cool. The walls were a smooth, dark material. The overseer stood before a large window, looking out at the stars and the crippled stalwart Vigil, which was now being attended by repair tugs. You reported the flaw, the overseer said, without turning. Its voice was smoother than the enforcer's, but just as devoid of warmth. Yes, Jinwoo said, standing straight. The engineer dismissed your report. Yes? Why did you report it? You knew it would be dismissed. Jinwoo was silent for a moment. He chose his words with care. It was my function to report. The outcome was not my function. The overseer finally turned. Its large, dark eyes studied Jinwoo. It saw a man of average height, thin, calm, unremarkable. Your observational capacity is anomalous. Your species is not technical. You are laborers. Your cognitive range is limited. Jinwoo said nothing. Arguing was pointless. Agreeing was dangerous. The overseer took his silence as acceptance. You will continue your maintenance duties. You will also observe. You will report any further anomalies in systems, in processes, in your own kind. You will report directly to this channel. It gestured, and a new code appeared on Jinwoo's data slate, which he had brought with him. Jinwoo looked at the code. He understood. He was being made a tool, a spy, a filter for information. The Kesperans were too arrogant to see for themselves. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. But he also felt something else. A tiny, dangerous flicker. An opening. I understand, he said. Go, said the overseer, turning back to the stars. Jinwoo walked out. The door slid shut behind him. He stood in the empty, polished corridor. He looked down at the code on his slate. It was a chain. It was also a key. He had been given permission to see, to think, to analyze. The overseer wanted to use his eyes. It did not understand that giving a man new eyes meant he would see everything differently. He walked back to the lower levels. The hum of the shipyard felt different. The groans of metal, the pulse of energy conduits, the rush of air processors, it was no longer just noise. It was information. He had been handed the first piece of a puzzle. He did not know the picture yet, but he knew he would now look for all the other pieces. The Kesperans had taught him the first lesson. They were blind to their own weaknesses. It was a very good place to start.